The Michael Hatfield Remax team presents Real Estate and More.
Bay Area real estate is different than in all of America. And why? What's up with home buyers? What's on sellers' minds? How is the market? And much, much more.
Now, here's your host, Michael Hatfield.
Well, welcome to the Real Estate and More show. Today, we are to hear from as close as we can get to the horse's mouth. We are going to talk about bad blood that ran deep between two Appalachian families. After the Civil War, with the hardship conditions the way that they were, there was no forgiveness. On the show, we are to talk about decades of the Red Blood War between the Hatfield and the McCoy families and hear it from the third generation great-great-grandson of William Anderson, called Devil Anse Hatfield. Devil Anse was the patriarch of the Hatfield family. The feud began in 1863 between best friends, neighbors, and fellow soldiers, and then after the war between the states, and it lasted for many decades. My guest on the show today is truly a nice man, the curator of the Hatfield MCCOY Museum and Foundation in Sarah Ann, West Virginia. Growing up in Appalachia as a Hatfield, he is to share what he knows and remembers from this time in our American history. And I'm so appreciative that you are on the show today, sir. Welcome, Mr. Jack Hatfield.
Thank you, buddy. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me. It's an honor.
Oh, you've done so much with that museum and foundation that, the world needs to know about it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jack, and how you connect to the patriarch, the man that ran the feud back after the Civil War, and how do you connect to him, Jack?
Well, he had, of course, I can't remember if it was 11 or 13 children. I think it was 11 children he had. And his third son was Robert E. Lee Hatfield, named after General Lee that he served under in the Confederacy. Robert had two sons, one John, one Craig, and John would be my great-grandfather. His son, John Jr., had my father, Jack, or Jackie Sr., I guess. So that's how I relate back.
Wow, that's unbelievable connection. And the times after the Civil War were so full of hardship as opposed to before the Civil War. But anyway, Jack, folks, Jack is a country boy, but do not underestimate his abilities, as he holds an MBA degree and has considerable experience working for Fortune 500 companies. At one time, he had over 2,700 people working underneath him, and he has a passion for preserving the history and the knowledge that came with the bloody Hatfield and McCoy feud. It's part of American history, and that must take considerable amount of time from your everyday life, Jack.
It is my everyday life, Michael. I don't, it's all I do and focus on now. Of course, I live on site of Devil Anse's last home place, where he hid out during the feud and, stayed here till he passed in 1921. But, after retiring from the insurance industry during COVID, this kind of became my main focus.
Got a passion for it, my friend. First, before we get started with this, a few words about Appalachian conditions before and after the Civil War. Before the Civil War, the population was sparse, and the people that lived there would find enough resources to grow crops and to maintain themselves. They would be from farm to table, and they would get along just fine. But after the Civil War, the population increased considerably, and now the land had to take care of many more people and inhabitants. And that was really tough, and it led to hardship economic conditions at that time. Appalachia is Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. And in 1860, the civilization was really the western frontier, which is really strange, but to me, but it was. The region especially lacked well-established law and order, and courts and law enforcement agencies, they did exist, but they weren't incredibly effective. And the sparse population was really the answer prior to that date. But the big prop for the time was corn. Game was plentiful. What do you say, Jack, about after the Civil War? What happened in Appalachia?
Well, it was pretty devastated. We had a lot of the battles here in Appalachia, and West Virginia being a brand new state born out of the Civil War, the only state born from the Civil War. Of course, the states were fighting for each other's rights. So it was messy. It was bloody. And then, when you're in such a remote area as this in Appalachia, I mean, we're deep in Appalachia. It's very hard to come by resources even today. Even me running this museum and business here to find the resources to do what I've been trying to do has been next to impossible. So I can't even imagine what it was like back then here in the area after all of all that mess from the Civil War coming through here. And then we ended up going to the coal mine wars, which shaped our labor laws and everything today. People really do not understand the gravity that Appalachia, particularly this area here, which we now call the coal fields, played in America's legal system and social system and everything. And we even are still going by today. So it's quite interesting how it all has unfolded through the years, for sure.
Yeah. So after the Civil War, everything tended to go towards commercialism as far as the economy, whereas before the Civil War, it was people farming. So you had a lot of farmers. It began in sparse population, but then after the hardship was there because of that increased population. Well, now everybody has been sitting and waiting and wanting to know, how did this blood feud begin? These were neighbors on the Tug River, and they were friends. And what happened? How did this get so far out of control, Jack?
Well, first, let me make a little disclaimer. I am not a historian. I am a proud grandson who's been able to collect a lot of knowledge from a lot of sources. There are a lot of theories out there about the feud and what's happened and take place. And unfortunately, a lot of them are not documented. So we do have some documentation, of course, in the, with the legal system and things that it filtered through back then. But it is a really sad and tragic story that this area has endured for, and now it's a whole different story today. But even over the past 150 years, this area just keeps getting hit with tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. But basically, it all began over the Civil War, actually. I know a lot of people talk about the hog and they think it's over a hog, which drives me crazy, but it's far beyond that. There was a incident in the Civil War where Devil Anse was protecting his platoon over on what we call Devil's Backbone Mountain, not far from here. And during that incident, that battle over on Devil's Backbone Mountain, they were surrounded by Union soldiers. And he was known for his marksmanship. You were talking about, the plentiful game and hunting. That's what he did. He was a farmer. So if you look at his muster rolls, he, shows him listing as a farmer. And he was a very avid hunter. He loved to hunt, especially bear. He was known to be a crack shot for his marksmanship. So he told his platoon, load your guns, throw them beside me, and run down that back path. It's the only way out. If you don't, we'll all die. So he was going to hold them off. And he did. And miraculously, he made it back home, which turned into, the whole feud and how that began when he came back to his community. He found it burning. The community was in ruins. So, when the Union soldiers were coming through, of course, they were pillaging, ravaging, burning crops, homes, doing really bad things to the family members left behind. If you were a man during that time and had a gun, you were out fighting. So that left your farms and your family wide open game, and to the victor goes the spoils of war, right? So when they came back from that incident, that's when they created the Logan Wildcats, which was made up of militia. It was a local militia, because we talked about how, law and order was not really even set up. You got to think West Virginia wasn't even a state at that point. It was becoming a brand new state. So to have law and order set up this deep in Appalachia, that was years to come past that. So all these Confederate veterans abandoned the war and went AWOL, including Devil Anse, and they created a local militia called the Logan Wildcats. And the Logan Wildcats became a recognized police force, I guess we'll call it, in the area by the governor of West Virginia to help maintain and protect West Virginia's border right here with Kentucky. And because it's kind of a tri border.
And families were so large back then. I believe there was 13 family members with Devil Anse's family. And, you'd come back and you'd find that your family had been pillaged and your home burnt and in ruins. And whether or not you were on one side or the other of the Civil War, the sympathies were pretty much down the middle, I understand. And so you had Union people, you had Confederate people, but it went far beyond with the initial cause when things affected your family, correct? Yeah,
far beyond anyone could have ever imagined in many ways, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, wow. So what happened when he came back and they formed the Logan Wildcats? He turned into a commercialist. He meaning Devil Anse, did he not? Yes. Didn't he get into the lumber industry? And wasn't that the big?
Yep. After the war, as you said, things in Appalachia started turning commercial. So he went into logging and opened his own logging business and became very wealthy. Utilizing that business, so he brought himself up from absolutely nothing to, there's been rumors, I don't know the number, there's been rumors of up to 5 million of his value back then, in the early 1900s. I will say, the home that was here on the property was quite massive at the time, compared to, people living in shacks around here this deep in the mountains. So, I mean, it was definitely a marvel to see coming through Appalachia. And then you run into this big, huge, mansion in the middle of the woods. Wow. But yeah, he became a logger. And after the Civil War, that's what he went into. They called him a man of, what was it called? Of course, they call him a man of the mountains, but a man of many talents. He ended up becoming, later on, he ended up selling all that land to coal companies and railways, and then became consultants for the railways and the coal companies on where to find the coal. And he knew the land so well, where he hunted so much and knew all his land so well, that he then consulted the railways on the least path of resistance to get the coal out on the railways.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Remax.
And here's Michael Hatfield.
Business owners, have you considered how important the appearance and impression your offices make to prospective customers? Appearance and impression are critical to clients, thus to your overall success. If your company could use that warm, inviting, and welcoming appearance, I have an amazing complex of offices just listed for lease in the quaint town of Danville. Freshly remodeled, meticulously built, the 3,700 square foot space enjoys incredible street exposure, front and side entrances, abundant parking, reception, conference room, 11 individual offices, even a team member kitchen. This premium space is located in a blue ribbon building maintained by the renowned Sherman Properties Group. Waste not 1 minute. Call us now.
Get help with buying or selling by calling the Michael Hatfield RE/MAX Support Team at 1-800-800-5763. That's 1-800-800-5763.
And now, back to our show.
Wow.
So he kind of tripled down on his money. He was a very smart man. He definitely knew what he was doing, no doubt about it.
So during the war, did he not fight with the other head, the other patriarch of the McCoy family? They were friends, Randall McCoy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then what happened when Devil Anse left the war? He came back to Sarah Ann. Randall McCoy stayed in and fought, did he not?
Yes, he did. He stayed in and fought, and there was some animosity, of course, over that. Because they see. The Logan Wildcats, they were deserters of the war. But that I would have made the same decision if I was in their shoes. I'd be protecting my home and my family. You had to protect your and your own first, before you can help someone else.
Yeah.
So I don't blame them for doing what they did at all. I would have made the same decision. But of course, there was some animosity there from that. But what really kicked everything off, I was talking earlier about that Devil's Backbone incident where Devil Anse held off the Union soldiers so his Confederate platoon could escape. I think it was the captain, again, not a historian. So I think it was the captain for the Union crew that was there that Devil Anse took out. He wanted revenge for that situation in the Civil War. So while Devil Anse is out logging, working in his business, that Union captain recruited his best known shot from his platoons, which was a fellow by the name of Asa Harmon McCoy.
Oh,
that was Randall McCoy's brother. So, you had brother against brother in the Civil War. So Randall McCoy was a Confederate soldier. His brother Asa was a Union soldier.
Mm-hmm.
So he recruited Asa to help take out Devil Anse for revenge. Well, they missed. Devil Anse don't miss. So they took out the Union or the captain that day, but Asa Harmon McCoy escaped. So the Logan Wildcats hunted down Asa and took their revenge and killed him and sent him back. Yep. And that really was the first ever situation and killing of the Hatfield McCoy feud. Some historians and people don't count that as, the beginning, but it clearly was to me.
Yes.
So, but that's the date I go by, when they say, the feud went for, 30 years, what have you. That's the date I go by, which is when Asa Harmon McCoy was killed by the Logan Wildcats.
So here we are in the Civil War, they're fighting, and then Devil Anse leaves and founds the Logan Wildcats, but he leaves the war. Randall continues to fight. Yeah. And I understood, and I may be wrong with this, but I understand that Randall McCoy was actually put in a military prison for a short while. Yep. And so when he came out, the Hatfield family under Devil Anse had done well in the lumber industry, and the animosities were just so deep between the two of them, plus the event that you addressed with Asa Harmon McCoy. And that just really had to ignite it. Can we digress just a second here? Let's talk about the actual area. This isn't a big area where this feud actually took place. Tell us about that, Jack.
Yeah, they actually, I have a cool little map I can probably send you if you need, but They all lived within a 5-mile radius of each other when the feud began, and during the Civil War. There is the Tug River. We also call this the Tug Valley. The Tug River separates the states of West Virginia and Kentucky, and then we have Virginia border not far as well. So we have a tri-state border, but where we are at specifically and where all this took place was on the border of Kentucky and West Virginia, which, remember, the Civil War was just ending. States were fighting for their rights. And we didn't have a federal government system like, we're used to today. It was very different. It became a legal nightmare, which I'm sure we'll get into. But, in the area here, you're within a 5-mile radius, and a state line separating the two of you. Every household of every member in the feud was within 5 miles. Devil Anse was quoted that he was going so far back in the mountains that if the McCoys ever found him, he'd have a moat around his property, and they would shoot them before they got across.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Real Estate Minute with RE/MAX expert Michael Hatfield. Michael, what traits should we look for in selecting an agent?
Look for a deal maker with a positive attitude who will work tirelessly for you. An agent who is adept in multiple offer situations, drafting contracts, marketing and advertising a client's home, is familiar with multiple cultures, experienced in mortgage financing, inspections, and escrow, is a huge asset to his client.
What can you do as a plus for clients?
Your agent is your eyes and your ears, one who works behind the scenes on your behalf. A great attitude, working well with others, and keeping clients' priorities number one is a given for us.
Call 925-322-7775 now to schedule an appointment or complimentary home analysis. For excellence in real estate, call the Michael Hatfield RE/MAX team at 925-322-7775 or go to michaelhatfieldhomes.com.
Well, we were in the market to buy a house in Pleasanton for a very long time. So we saw this beautiful house. We walk in, we see Michael and Nancy. We just absolutely loved this house. Michael brought in a wealth of knowledge and experience to the whole home buying process. He was very professional, and both Michael and Nancy went way above and beyond to help us and to help us achieve the house of our dreams.
Now, back to our show.
And that's what he did. And that's, the location we're at. He came about 10 more miles inland into the mountains and, made him a hideout and later became, his home for life. But it's a very small area, very rural. It was just such a nightmare and such a legal nightmare between the borders of the states.
I understand. It was really hard times, so it was hard times after the Civil War, deep felt animosities between Randall McCoy and Devil Anse Hatfield. And the hardship of the families was so bad. And now we have this captain that had tried to take out Devil Anse. And now we're up to the point where the feud actually began, where Asa Harmon McCoy was shot and killed. And it's unclear who did that. There is some speculation that Uncle Jim did that, Uncle Jim Vance. And it's not clear, but it was definitely the Logan Wildcats that it actually did it. And I understand Devil Anse was actually at home sick during that period of time. Is that what, to your knowledge?
Yeah. I don't think there has been any evidence that he was actually part of the Logan Wildcats. It's quite interesting. That's one part that does baffle me with everything, because they were so instrumental in everything, explicitly for him, about him. So it's quite interesting. But it was definitely the Logan Wildcats. Jim Vance, Uncle Jim, was part of the Wildcats. It's as well as a lot of other Confederate veterans in the area.
So food was tough. animosities really ran deep, and people were looking for ways to make money so that they could support their families. The families were, quite candidly, they were usually pretty large. 13 people in the Hatfield family, 17 people on the McCoy side of Randall's family. A lot of people, a lot of mouths to feed, really hard. And one of the things, just as a quick an aside before we move on with the events of the feud, is that one of the products that came out of the times was what we call moonshine, whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
Whiskey, every family tended to have their own still, making their own whiskey. And they imbibed in that a lot too, which changes people's view on things even more. So animosity's deeper, food is scarce, hardships around, and there's this hate brewing with these families. Correct?
Oh yeah, big time. My grandfather particularly and John C. were big into the moonshine industry. To support themselves and their families. And Devil Anse, he never lost any children to the feud at all, surprisingly, unlike Randall McCoy, but he did end up losing 2 sons to moonshining. They had a shootout with the Italians in Fayette County over liquor distributing rights. And all 3 of them ended up killing each other during the shootout because they were all 3 such good shots. But yeah, it was a huge industry at the time, moonshining. So the family was definitely known for their moonshine, and of course their shooting for sure.
Unbelievable. So now we have the Civil War ending, and all of these economic conditions and hardships that are going on, and the animosities that are going on. Bitter rivalries occurred between members of both families. And is it true that at one time they were just the best of friends? The Hatfields on the side of West Virginia, Tug River, they lived there, and then the McCoys on the Kentucky side, and they were happy and harmonious. And then the war happened, and then all of this exploded and ignited into the feud.
So much animosity, hardship, bloodshed making up this part of Appalachian and American history. Not at all charming, but history nevertheless. Next week, I hope you tune in for part 2 of Blood Red, the Hatfield McCoy feud, a 3-part series. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jack Hatfield Jr., 3rd great-grandson of William Anse, Devil Anse Hatfield. They called him Devil Anse, a man they said was 6 foot of devil and 180 pounds of pure hell. You've been listening to the Real Estate and More Show. We'll be back shortly with our next special guest. Stay tuned.
Please remember to go to our new YouTube handle, My Real Talk Show. That's My Real Talk Show at youtube.com, and touch that subscribe button. You can also find past aired shows at our handle, My Real Talk Show, on youtube.com.